Welcome. Well, I have Chris here from Futuresource, and Chris and we know each other for many, many years, and Chris, everything has changed in the past 6 months. I heard this morning the news 6 months ago, COVID-19 came to Germany, probably the same in UK, it just took you a little bit longer to adapt to that. So everything we know from the past, everything, it's basically worthless. So where's the market today? Where are we currently? What does it mean for the industry?
Hey, I mean, it's been unprecedented, hasn't it, the change that we've seen. And there are so many moving parts. I mean, the worthless part, yes, I think everyone is grappling to understand where the industry is at, how quickly we're going to come out of this, if we're even going to come out of it, right? It's just all so fluid at the moment. So for us, I think when you're looking at just purely the numbers, we are kind of at the moment thinking about forecasting logic and modeling. We're in a crisis period, so we're trying to gauge when we come out of that set of modeling into recessionary forecasting logic and modeling, because we're kind of comfortable with that. We've been through lots of those before. It's just how long does this crisis period last for? And again, I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So I suppose, if you think about the chronology of all of this, and you and I have spoken on this before, initially in sort of January, February time, and again, I've spoken on various webinars and conferences, so I've bored people with this already, but initially we were looking at a supply side shock. I think everyone in the industry was. And what we've realized as we've come out of that is that was fairly short and sharp. If you think about what was happening in China, where a lot of our manufacturing is happening now globally for Pro AV generally, but certainly display, we were building inventory for Chinese New Year. Every year that happens. People were building inventory for the tariff wars that we were expecting between the US and China, for Brexit. Thank goodness we don't have to talk about that too much at the moment. And so we were we were in a good position for that supply side shock. And actually what we've seen in China is the factories have come back on remarkably quickly. Some never closed at all. So that supply side shock that we were expecting, it didn't really happen. We've still got a little bit of a hangover in componentry and some PCB and power supplies and things, but it's been okay. The biggest shock, of course, has been demand, and that is just absolutely unprecedented.
Chris, I mean, the year started quite well, right? I mean, January, February were fantastic. I mean, at least, the numbers we saw from all the integrators, everything looked like a fantastic year. But what are your indicators for the first 6 months? How much down are we?
Just about to publish. So we're 3 days away from publishing. So it's
sorry.
No, but it's fine. I've done my homework. So we're looking at all the preliminary numbers. Some come in very late, but Q2, we're looking typically around 50% down year on year, which is huge, right? That will balance out across first half. So first half was pretty strong generally. Depending on which geography you're looking at, if we're talking globally, of course, China was very different. That was Q1 and then has recovered, fairly quickly. So it really depends on the market we're in. I suppose what we're looking at now is what does the second half look like? We're in August, we can start to look at the end of the year with a bit more, not confidence necessarily, but okay, how do we think this is all going to end out? I suppose to deal with the difficult issues first, government stimulus packages are coming to an end or they're being tailed off, and they have been masking the real situation, of course, particularly when it comes to unemployment. Consumer credit lines are being pulled back, so I'm careful not to talk about end users and consumers, but consumer confidence, which impacts a lot of the pro world, is really, really heavily hit. And key countries, in fact, all economies are going into recession. So and we're expecting those to be quite deep. So that's a very difficult situation. I think if we look at geopolitical issues, I don't want to go too much about this, but these are the macro factors. We do look at the Chinese-US tariff wars that are going on. We do talk about Brexit. I suppose more pertinent to our industry, we look at the kind of Chinese technology tensions, particularly around Huawei, and generally kind of anti-Chinese sentiment, which is building up, which is a little bit ironic given we're in a world of diversity and inclusion, right? But that's very much happening now. And so if we look at where the supply chain is coming from, and that is predominantly China, if you think about Samsung's news recently that it's going to be pulling away from LCD production entirely, and we look at BOE and China Star ramping up, so LCD is going towards China, LED. Interesting to see what happens with mini LED and micro LED.
To Vietnam, right? They're moving to Vietnam, right? At least Samsung or so.
Yeah. Vietnam's a classic base. If we're talking about production, assembly, we're seeing companies diversify and be much more local across the world. But that raises some interesting questions for China generally. I think through this COVID period, we've seen Chinese companies repatriate staff back to China, which you would expect. If we think about LED in particular, that's left some quite big gaps operationally and service and support wise, just at a time when the major international display brands are all pivoting towards LED. So there's a lot going on in that world. We're going to see a lot more M&A, which was already happening before, to try and build footprint. My feeling is that we'll see quite a few of those Chinese companies move back into a classic kind of OEM, ODM model as the sort of display industry matures, and we'll probably start to get back to that sort of status quo of the major international display brands kind of ruling globally, if you like. So there's a lot going on there.
I mean, Chris Riegel just announced, that he wants to assemble micro LED in the US in the future. I thought, great news. Well, we all know Chris. He's always good for a big headline.
Yeah. And what a phenomenally brave move. And if we're going to talk about sort of individual technologies, LED at the moment, we're actually just about to publish our LED report at the end of this month, so we're just finalising it. The race is on for mass transfer. People misconstrue mini LED and micro LED with pixel pitch, and anyway, I don't get too much into that. But the race is really on for kind of mass transfer techniques. And so it's interesting to see outside of the big powerhouses. It's interesting to see. I'm certainly not saying Stratacache isn't one of those, but when we think about the big manufacturing powerhouses, it's interesting to see a company come out and do that. I think it's wonderful news for the States and for Chris and the team. Yeah.
Do you expect also some LED manufacturing or assembly in Europe just for tariff purposes? Because I believe tariffs will be...
Yeah, we already see that. So there's companies, Layard has assembly and production in Slovakia. I expect to see more companies do that. I think we're talking specifically around LED. We talk about 2020 now being an inflection point, where we've spoken about this for a long time, where China Inc., if you think about the major Chinese manufacturers, they've been coming out, they've been building a presence internationally, but they've been doing that largely on a technology leadership point. And some of them have been very successful in building local operations and generally being more local. We've been saying for a long time, when do the big international display brands, your Samsungs, your LGs, your NECs, your Sonys, your Philips, whoever, when do they really start to gear up? And this year, Samsung's been doing that for a long time now, but this year really accelerating. LG's coming out much more strongly this year. Sharp have announcements out. ViewSonic's just launched. There's a lot of major international brands coming through. So we hear this point about brand equity a lot in the market now, where we're seeing integrators paying a premium for international established brands, where perhaps they're a little bit more reticent to be dealing with Chinese companies, and particularly now as that repatriation's happened over the last 6 months. You're worried about your service and support, and that's being pulled away. I'm being very generalistic about this. Some companies are doing better than others. And you think about what the brand equity piece comes with Samsung and LG and the major display companies, huge operations, all the service and support and wrap that you would expect. And that technology leadership starting to level up a bit.
I think the micro LED stuff is or COB or whatever you call it. It's very fascinating because we were quite surprised to hear, that Samsung is, really selling it at a very low entry price as a new product. And secondly, that all of their new COB products, get like sexy brands. It's like the canvas, the wall, the whatever, the crystal, whatever. It's like it's really interesting to see how LED, which was like a long product number in the past, it's becoming now mainstream, and obviously,
isn't it? And the other thing that I think is interesting about what Samsung and others will do is they will bring mass manufacturing, and not just at a technique level, but the way that is packaged and distributed. The thing we hear about Samsung time and time again recently is you will receive that order packaged up exactly like you would a TV, nicely boxed out. Whereas again, I'm being very generalistic, but quite often you'll receive a crate load of product from China. So if you're thinking about that as an integrator, which one are you going to go with? And then we talk a lot about sort of moving away from a project-based business to more of a run rate business, which involves distribution. And it's quite difficult. LED is still quite a difficult product from a distribution standpoint to logistically handle. As we start to see those mass manufacturing techniques or logistical operations at the back end of that come through, it just starts to change the maturity of the industry. And again, we talk about that a lot in our reporting, that we are getting to a more mature phase. We're still in the fast growth phase of LED. There's still a long way to go. And as I say, we are saying COB, mass transfer techniques, they're the things that we're waiting for. But this year we really see that being, an inflection point for the industry.
Chris, I can't let you go before talking about what will the end of the year look like.
Numbers.
Well, it's not a precise number, but the trajectory is obviously.
I can do this. I can do this. And let me just say first up, we need confidence in the Pro AV industry, in signage, in display, UC&C is fine, right? That's booming. But we need confidence. We need ISE. We need Infocom. We need the shows. And I think we are definitely seeing some of those first kind of green shoots, if you like. And there's a lot going on, and it's very fluid. So I'll couch all of that before I say this. But we obviously crunch numbers. We have our pre-COVID forecast. We have our current COVID forecast, if you like, and engaging the recovery. We look at recovery curves. We don't model on recovery curves, but once we put it all together, we look at how that looks, and you have hockey stick and U-shape and all these classic analyst things.
Nike swoosh shape. The latest one is Nike swoosh shape.
and that honestly is pretty much what we are predicting for the display industry. We look at scenarios. The other thing I would just say, sorry to give a shameless plug, is if you come to our website, we have a COVID report, free download, which covers all the macro trends and then goes down into different technologies. So please come and engage with that. It's really interesting stuff in there. But we have a best base and worst case scenario. Our base is what we expect, and so if you look at that really, really generalistically, we are talking about it's still massive uncertainty and instability in second half 2020, moving towards a more stable, I'm not saying recovered, but stable world in first half 2021. And that's when I think we'll switch from this crisis sort of forecasting logic to our recessionary forecasting logic, where we feel much more comfortable with that. But if you look at the numbers, if you look this year, we see the market being down, overall pro display market being down about 24%, 25%, which is but it's not, if you look across other industries, it's not too terrible. It is not great news, but it's not too terrible. That equates to about $8 billion worth of, sorry to do that in dollars, worth of lost revenue, but we'll still see the market come in around 25 billion. Okay, so that's okay. If you then look at the shape of that recovery curve until it meets our pre-COVID forecast, we're looking at that, depending on the technology, kind of 2023, 2024. And that will equate to about $20 billion of lost revenue across that 5-year period. But we will see the industry come in, I've just got the number up here, $170 billion worth across that 5-year period, cumulatively. And so that's about 11% down on our pre-COVID forecast across that period. So that hopefully helps to sort of quantify some of our logic. Some of those areas will recover really, really quickly. And I would say, just if we are finishing this up, what will come out of this will be creativity, will be innovation. There's some really fantastic things coming on that you're going to talk about through, your conference. How we think about touch, what's going to happen with touch and interactivity, and then we start to look at, well, wow, what about QR codes that we've had forever? What about voice assistants? What about gesture? So there's going to be all these really cool things that we've been talking about for a while that I think will accelerate because of this. And generally, we will see business come out fitter, leaner, and we'll see a very different shape of the industry. But we're really, really positive for the recovery.
Chris, thanks a lot. It was very fascinating. As you mentioned before, there's lots of information on your website, obviously, and it was great having you here, and hope to see you soon in real again. This is only half the fun, to be honest. Thanks for being here today.
Good luck with the conference. Thanks, Florian.
Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.